In the heart of India, where the Ganges flows and the call to prayer echoes over ancient temples, two civilizations once met, not with swords but with words, not with hate but with heart. This is the story of Islam meeting Hinduism, a dialogue long forgotten, yet still whispering through the winds of Delhi, Ajmer, and Varanasi. I am Mallam JIJI, and you're listening to Wisdom from the Minbar, where truth meets reflection and history speaks again. When Islam first reached India, it didn't arrive as a conqueror's creed. It arrived as a traveler's faith. Caravans came bearing not just spices and silk, but also the light of revelation. And the people they met, the seekers, the yogis, the scholars, found in Islam's message something strangely familiar, the echo of one God, Allahad, whom they had long sought through meditation and dhikr. For centuries, this land became a meeting place of the mind and the soul. Sufis and sadhus, madrasas and ashrams, dhikr and bhajans. There were bridges of poetry, of love, of spiritual thirst that transcended names and nations. But somewhere along the way, those bridges broke. Politics replaced peace. Division replaced dialogue. The same land that once sang together in remembrance of God began to argue over his name. So today, we return to that forgotten conversation, to rediscover what India once knew, that faith, when pure, never divides. That Islam's message of La ilaha illallah, there is no God but Allah, was never meant to erase cultures, but to refine hearts. And so I ask you, dear listener, before you scroll past, before you judge this topic, open your heart for the next few minutes. Let's journey through the centuries, from the shrines of the Sufis to the songs of the saints, to uncover a truth that India once lived and the world needs to hear again. Because when Islam met Hinduism, something beautiful was born, and maybe, just maybe, it can be reborn in our time. Before we begin, do one simple act of dua. Like this video, share it with someone curious, and subscribe to Wisdom from the Minbar. Your one click could help revive forgotten history. Let's begin. Bismillah Aram. The meeting of two civilizations. Before swords and empires ever entered the story, there were ships, sailing quietly across the Arabian Sea, carrying merchants from Yemen, Oman, and the coast of Hijaz. They didn't come to conquer, they came to trade. But in their hearts, they carried something far more valuable than spices or silk. They carried the kalima, the testimony that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger. These early Muslims were the first ambassadors of Islam to India, not through speeches, but through character. They were honest in trade, humble in dealings, and pure in conduct. Historians record that by the 7th century, Muslim traders were already settled in Malabar, Kerala, and Gujarat. Local kings were impressed by their fairness, their integrity, and their refusal to cheat or lie. It was said that one Muslim trader's honesty in returning a lost pouch of gold moved an Indian ruler so deeply that he invited him to his court and asked about his faith. That was how Dawah began, not with debates, but with deeds. As time passed, Islam spread inland, not by force but by fascination. Hindu scholars and seekers who had long meditated on the concept of the one, formless, eternal truth, Brahman, began to hear of Allah, the one without partner, without image, without equal. They were curious. Who was this prophet Muhammad who spoke of mercy, justice, and unity under one creator? Who was this ummah, a community beyond caste, beyond birth, beyond class? This was something revolutionary for a land divided by caste and ritual. In Islam, the slave could stand beside the prince in prayer. The rich and poor bowed to the same God, on the same ground, in the same direction. And that, my brothers and sisters, struck the Indian heart deeply. Because beneath all the philosophies and rituals, India was always a land of seekers. They sought truth through meditation, through silence, through sacrifice, and now they saw it embodied in men who lived it. Historical accounts tell us that by the 8th century, Muslim communities flourished in the Indian subcontinent. But the real meeting, the spiritual meeting, happened when hearts began to talk, not tongues. Hindu yogis would sit with Sufi mystics. They would listen to verses of the Qur'an and recite their Vedas in response. And somewhere in between, they would find echoes of the same divine truth, that all power belongs to the one Creator, that this world is temporary, that the soul must return to its source. It wasn't about changing faiths, it was about recognizing light wherever it shined. When Islam met Hinduism, it was like two rivers merging into one ocean, different in name, but flowing toward the same truth. The Prophet said, "Wisdom is the lost property of the believer. Wherever he finds it, he has the right to take it." And that's what many Muslims in India did. They saw wisdom in their Hindu neighbors' search for the divine. They didn't mock it. They mirrored it with revelation. At the same time, some Hindu thinkers found beauty in Islam's simplicity. No idols, no intermediaries, only direct connection with the one God. They admired how the Muslim call to prayer united millions in a single act of worship, how every act of life, eating, speaking, even marriage, was guided by remembrance of God. This was not a clash of faiths, but a conversation of hearts. But slowly, as centuries passed, that spiritual exchange began to fade under the weight of politics. Kings fought for power, not piety. Empires built walls where saints had built bridges. And the dialogue that once illuminated India became a forgotten chapter of history. Yet, even today, in the echoes of the dargahs of Ajmer, in the songs of Kabir and Amir Khusro, and in the rhythms of qawwali sung beside temple bells, you can still feel the heartbeat of that ancient meeting. The day when Islam met Hinduism, and both stood in awe before the same Creator. And among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the diversity of your tongues and colors. Indeed, and that are signs for those of knowledge. Quran 30:22. So, let's remember, Islam didn't come to erase India's soul, it came to awaken it. To remind her that beyond all names and forms, there's only one, Allah, Alak, the ultimate truth. The Sufis and the saints of India. When Islam met India, it wasn't through palaces or politics. It came through the hearts of men who loved Allah more than the world. Men who slept on bare earth, but whose words shook kings. They were the Sufis, the saints, the wanderers, the torchbearers of divine love. Their mission was not empire, but empathy. Their weapon was not the sword, but the dhikr, the remembrance of Allah. They didn't argue theology, they lived it. And in doing so, they won hearts that no army ever could. One of the earliest and greatest among them was Khwāja Moinuddin Chishti, R.A., known across India as Garib Nawaz, the helper of the poor. He came to India in the 12th century, not as a conqueror, but as a comforter. He walked into a land divided by caste, and simply said, "Love all and serve all." His Kanka in Ajmer became a home for everyone, Muslim, Hindu, rich, poor, untouchable, noble. People didn't just come to listen to his words, they came to feel his presence. He fed the hungry, healed the sick, and embraced the outcast. He taught that a true Muslim is one from whose tongue and hand others are safe. That was Islam in motion, not in books, but in behavior. And Khwāja was not alone. Across India, Sufis like Nizamuddin Auliya, Baba Farid, Bahaduddin Zakaria, and Qutbuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki carried that same flame. They built no kingdoms, yet they ruled over millions of hearts. In Delhi, Nizamuddin Auliya, R.A., would feed hundreds daily, never turning anyone away. When asked how he financed it, he said, "When you feed others for Allah, He feeds you from places you cannot imagine." Even Hindu villagers who had never heard Arabic knew the warmth of his smile. They would visit his shrine and say, "Here, the air feels lighter." And that's what the Prophet Muhammad meant when he said, "The most beloved people to Allah are those who bring benefit to others." What made the Sufis special was that they didn't preach separation. They preached connection. They believed that every soul was a mirror, and when you look deep enough, you'll see the same light of Allah shining within. So when they met Hindu saints and yogis, they didn't argue, they shared silence. In those moments of stillness, Both sides felt something sacred, that the journey to truth begins with purifying the heart. This is why historians say that Sufism in India was not an imported ideology. It was a divine harmony with India's ancient spirituality. The Hindu Bhakti movement and Islamic tasawwuf began to reflect each other, both calling mankind to devotion through love. The poetry of Amir Khusro, the disciple of Nizamuddin Auliya, captured this spirit perfectly. He wrote in Persian, Arabic, and Hindi, and his words still echo today. Every heart is my homeland, every tongue my language. He didn't see religion as walls. He saw it as windows to the same sky. But the beauty of the Sufis went beyond words. Their shrines, dargahs, became symbols of peace. They were not just places of worship, but of healing. People came to weep, to pray, to seek blessings. Even non-Muslims would tie strings of hope around the lattice walls, believing that the prayers of the saints reached the heavens. In a time when India's caste system divided humans into higher and lower, Islam, through these Sufis, declared that the only rank that matters is taqwa, piety before Allah. That message cut through centuries of social injustice and touched the hearts of millions. Wisdom from the Minbar reflection. You see, my brothers and sisters, this was the dawah that worked, not through speeches but through service, not through condemnation but compassion. The Sufis didn't demand that people enter Islam. They showed them why Islam is beautiful. This is the lesson we've forgotten in our digital age, that hearts are not opened by argument, but by akhlaq, by the sweetness of character. Today, even centuries later, the dargahs of these saints remain full. Muslim and Hindu alike still visit, seeking the same mercy of Allah that these men once reflected. And whether we agree or not with every practice that followed, one truth remains. It was love, not power, that spread Islam in India. And love, dear viewers, is still the greatest miracle of all. The empires of harmony and conflict. History has two faces, one of faith, one of power. And in India, when Islam and Hinduism met under kings and empires, both faces showed themselves. What began as a spiritual exchange between saints soon entered the courts of sultans, the palaces of emperors, and the hearts of rulers. The Delhi Sultanate rose first, Qutb-ud-Din Aibak, Iltutmish, and later the Khiljis and Tughlaqs. Some saw Islam as divine justice entering a land weighed down by inequality. Others used it as a banner for conquest. Between them were the scholars and ulam who tried to remind rulers, if you rule by Islam, rule by mercy. Yet politics rarely listens to piety. There were moments of great peace and tolerance, and others of pain. Mosques were built beside temples. Sometimes, sadly, temples were destroyed beside mosques. But beyond the monuments and battles, the ordinary people still lived together, buying from the same markets, drawing water from the same wells, celebrating births, and mourning death side by side. Then came the Mughal era, perhaps the most defining chapter in the encounter between Islam and Hinduism. Among its rulers stood Akbar the Great, a man fascinated by all paths to truth. He invited Hindu pundits, Jain monks, Christian priests, and Muslim scholars to his court in Fatehpur Sikri. He called this the Ibadat Khana, the house of worship. Akbar dreamed of unity, creating what he called the Din-i-Ilahi, a faith meant to blend the best of every religion. But what began as a vision of peace soon lost its anchor in revelation. For when truth is mixed too freely, clarity fades. Still, his intention was clear. He longed for harmony in a land of difference. And that longing, that dream of coexistence, left its mark on India forever. After Akbar came his grandson Aurangzeb Alamgir, a ruler devoted to Sharia, memorizer of Qur'an, and a man of discipline. He reversed Akbar's experiments and returned to a stricter religious code. He built mosques, re-implemented Islamic law, but his reign also stirred tensions with Hindu populations. Where Akbar had opened doors, Aurangzeb closed some. Yet both were children of the same soil, shaped by the same spiritual crossroads. Here lies the lesson. Empires rise with faith and fall with arrogance. No ruler can own Islam, nor can any throne contain the truth. The Prophet said, "The most despised of people to Allah is a tyrannical ruler." And he also said, "A just ruler will be under the shade of Allah on the Day of Judgment." India saw both kinds, and history remembers both. But beyond the courts and battles, the spirit of unity survived in the streets, the songs, and the souls of the common folk. Muslim artisans carved temples, Hindu masons built mosques. Qawwals sang praises of Allah in Hindi. Poets wrote couplets that mentioned both Rama and Rahman. Because at the level of the heart, the people never forgot what the empires tried to silence, that we are all servants before one creator. In times of war, Sufis still fed the hungry of both sides. When kings argued over creed, saints reminded them, "You can conquer lands, but never hearts, unless Allah wills." Wisdom from the Minbar reflection. My brothers and sisters, history is a mirror. When Islam rules with justice, people remember its mercy. But when it's used for power, they remember its cruelty, and that is not Islam. We must never allow politics to bury spirituality again. The India of the past teaches us that harmony cannot be legislated, it must be lived. True coexistence doesn't need royal decrees, it needs righteous hearts. The story of the empires reminds us that Islam in India was both tested and tempered by time. When rulers sought Allah, peace reigned. When they sought power, faith suffered. But through it all, the light of the Qur'an and the compassion of the Sunnah continued to glow, carried not by armies, but by ordinary believers who prayed, worked, and lived in the same streets as their Hindu neighbors. And that is why, even after 1,000 years of dynasties and divisions, the call to prayer still echoes beside the temple bell, a testimony that the meeting between Islam and Hinduism could never be erased, only forgotten. Shared wisdom, what the scriptures reveal. Every revelation carries a spark of the same eternal flame. Across mountains, across languages, across generations, God has spoken to mankind in many tongues, through many hearts. And in India, where Islam and Hinduism met, the dialogue between the Quran and the Vedas whispered of truths that sometimes echoed each other. Today, we revisit that dialogue, not to mix faiths, but to witness how divine wisdom travels through time and culture. The Quran declares, "Indeed, we sent a messenger to every nation, saying, 'Worship Allah and avoid false gods.'" Surah An-Nahl 16:36. This verse reminds us that revelation did not begin or end with Islam. It is a chain of divine messages, and the Prophet Muhammad is its final seal, not its beginning. And so, could it be that India too, before the rise of Islam, received messages of tawḥīd, oneness of God? Many scholars, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, have pondered this. They found verses in the ancient Rig Veda that say, "Ekam sat vipra buddhavideni," the truth is one, though the wise call it by many names. Compare that to the Quranic truth. Your God is one God. There is no deity but Him. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:163. Two civilizations, two languages, yet one heartbeat, tawḥīd. The oneness of the Creator, the foundation of all truth. The Bhagavad Gita speaks of the soul that does not die. As a man casts off worn-out clothes and puts on new ones, so the soul casts off old bodies and enters new ones. While the Quran proclaims, "Every soul shall taste death, then to us you will be returned." Surah Al-Ankabut 29:57. Different expressions, but both speak to the eternity of the soul, its journey beyond this world. Both traditions teach that life is not an accident, but a test. That actions have consequences, that the soul belongs to God and will return to Him. Yet we must be cautious, my brothers and sisters, for where the Quran brings clear monotheism, the Hindu scriptures often drift into symbolism, a forest of gods, forms, and metaphors. Some interpret these as multiple faces of one divine. Others took them literally, turning symbols into idols. And here lies the difference between revelation preserved and revelation lost. The Quran stands unaltered its words memorized by millions, unchanged for 1,400 years. While the ancient scriptures of India, though containing deep truths, passed through generations of retelling, translation, and human addition, the light remained, but its clarity blurred. Still, we cannot ignore what is beautiful within them. The Upanishads speak of controlling desire, speaking truth, showing mercy, and meditating upon the Creator. The Quran too commands. Indeed, Allah commands justice, excellence, and giving to relatives, and forbids immorality, bad conduct, and oppression. Surah An-Nahl 16 hours 90 minutes. Both paths, at their highest, teach self-purification to conquer the lower self, nafs, and rise to the higher self, ruh. And this is why many Hindu mystics and Muslim Sufis found common ground in silence and devotion. The Sufi says, La ilaha illa Allah. The yogi says Brahman is one. Different languages, same longing for the one beyond all form. But remember, similarity is not sameness. Islam is not an evolution of older paths. It is their correction and completion. It confirms the truth they once held and removes the falsehood time had added. Allah says, This day I have perfected for you your religion, completed my favor upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as your way. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5:3. So when Islam met Hinduism, it was not a clash, it was a reminder. A reminder that all sincere seekers, wherever they began, are being called back to the final message of unity. Reflection to the Ummah. My dear brothers and sisters, Allah's wisdom fills every corner of creation. When you see truth in another faith, don't fear it. Recognize it as a trace of His mercy. But also remember that only Islam keeps the light pure, uncorrupted, eternal. And so, reminds us, when hearts are humble, even two very different faiths can find echoes of the same divine truth. But when pride, culture, or nationalism enters, revelation turns into rivalry. The Quran was never sent to erase other wisdoms. It was sent to complete them. And in that completion, all the scattered lights of humanity find their source again. In Allah, the One, the Eternal, the Self-Sufficient. Modern reflections. Can Islam and Hinduism coexist today, carrying the same emotional and reflective tone? Modern reflections. Can Islam and Hinduism coexist today? Once upon a time, the dialogue between Islam and Hinduism was alive, filled with scholars, poets, mystics, and kings who sought truth, not power. But today, that conversation has been replaced by noise, by fear, politics, and headlines that divide rather than unite. India, the land that once gave birth to peaceful coexistence between the mosque and the mandir, now trembles under the shadow of mistrust. But the question remains, can Islam and Hinduism still coexist today? Or have we forgotten the harmony that once was? The truth is, coexistence is not new to Islam. It is part of its foundation. The Prophet Muhammad said, Whoever harms a non-Muslim under Muslim protection, I will be his opponent on the Day of Judgment. Sunan Abu Dawud 30:52. Islam didn't come to erase people. It came to erase injustice. It didn't come to dominate hearts. It came to guide them. And this was exactly how Islam once thrived in India. Not by sword, but by spirit. The Sufis entered villages with nothing but Qur'ans in their hearts and compassion in their hands. They sat under banyan trees, spoke of love, patience, and surrender to the one Creator. Hindus came to listen, not because they were forced, but because their souls recognized the truth in those words. But somewhere along the centuries, politics replaced piety. Religion became a weapon, not a window. Colonial powers, caste systems, and modern nationalism began to twist what was once sacred. And so, two great civilizations that once shared wisdom began to see each other as rivals, not reflections. Yet, when you strip away the noise and return to the essence, both faiths still teach one thing. The world is temporary. The soul is eternal. God is one. Allah says in the Quran, Do you be your religion? and to me be mine. Surah Al-Kafirun 109:6. This verse was not arrogance, it was clarity. It was Allah teaching us to hold firm to truth while respecting others' paths. It was the blueprint for coexistence, one rooted not in compromise, but in conviction. My brothers and sisters, let us reflect. We cannot build peace by hiding truth, nor can we build unity by mocking belief. The Qur'an teaches dialogue, not debate for victory, but discussion for understanding. The Prophet spoke to Jews, Christians, and even idol worshippers, never to humiliate them, but to invite them with hikmah, wisdom, and rahmah, mercy. If Islam could coexist with people of many faiths in Medina, then surely it can coexist in the hearts of 1 billion souls in India. If only we remember the principles of justice, humility, and love for humanity. Hinduism, too, speaks of unity in diversity, of peace, shanti, compassion, karuna, and truth, satya. And when these virtues meet the Quranic values of adl, justice, ihsan, goodness, and rahmah, mercy, a bridge is born, a bridge that does not erase difference, but celebrates divine diversity. Allah tells us, O mankind, we created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another. Surah Al-Hujurat 49:13. Notice, so that you may know one another, not hate one another. Islam's message to India and to the world is not to become the same, but to see the same God behind all creation. And yet, we must also stand firm, because coexistence does not mean silence in the face of falsehood. The Quran calls for clarity with compassion, to speak truth even when it's uncomfortable. So when we say, La ilaha illa Allah, it is not an insult to others. It is a reminder that truth cannot be divided, that no idol, no prophet, no saint, no symbol can replace the Creator himself. Coexistence must never come at the cost of tawḥīd. For peace without truth is like a garden without light. It grows but never blooms. Final reflection. My dear viewers, if Islam and Hinduism are to coexist again, it will not happen in parliaments or protests. It will begin in the human heart, when we see others not as enemies of faith, but as seekers of meaning. Then the forgotten dialogue of India will speak again, not through scholars or kings, but through ordinary believers like you and me. Sparkles, if this message touched your heart, don't let it fade. Share it with someone who still believes dialogue is possible. Subscribe, like, and comment below, and keep spreading light through understanding, not argument. This is wisdom from the Minbar, where hearts meet, faith speaks, and truth stands tall. And so, after all these centuries, we see that the story of Islam and Hinduism was never one of war. It was one of wonder. It was the meeting of two seekers standing before the same truth. From Khwāja Moinuddin Chishti in Ajmer to the mystic Kabir in Varanasi, both called mankind to purify the heart. Both spoke of detachment from the world. Both sought nearness to the divine. The language was different, but the thirst was the same. And that, my brothers and sisters, is the beauty India once held. Unity without uniformity, difference without division. But we lost it, buried under layers of politics, nationalism, and misunderstanding. Now, the question is not what happened then, but what we will do now. Will we rebuild those bridges? Will we listen again, learn again, love again? Because Islam teaches us that the best among you are those who bring benefit to others. And Rasulullah said, none of you truly believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. That includes the neighbor who worships differently, the friend who prays another way, the stranger who simply seeks truth. Let this episode remind you, dua is not only spoken through words, it's shown through adab, through compassion, through justice. Let the light of La ilaha illallah shine, not by argument, but by example. If you felt inspired by this journey through history, then don't let it end here. Make it your legacy. Like this video, leave your reflection below, share it across your platforms, and subscribe to Wisdom from Minbar. where we bring you timeless Islamic wisdom for today's world. And as always, this is Mallam JIJI reminding you, faith is not just what we believe, it's what we build together. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.